Today I'll be giving a presentation on the Morris worm. So for the background, the Morris worm was one of the first computer worms to be released onto the internet, which was actually known as the ARPANET at the time. And as a brief description, a computer worm is basically a form of malware that's able to replicate itself onto other computers without user interaction. So what the Morris worm did was it infected Unix-based machines and used vulnerabilities on those machines to spread throughout various networks on the internet. And it had multiple methods of entry into these networks, one of which was the Unix SendMail program, which had an application vulnerability which allowed for the Morris worm to execute without authorization. And another way the Morris worm was able to execute itself on these machines was because of the regsec slash RSHA program, which was a program that network administrators use to log into their systems remotely. And the issue with this program was that, or rather the administrators was they set no password requirements for logging into those machines remotely, and this led to the creation of weak passwords, which the Morris worm was easily able to bypass using a brute force password attack. And lastly, the Morris worm took advantage of a network protocol known as the Finger Network Service, which was commonly used at the time. And this network service had a vulnerability which allowed for buffer overflow attacks, which basically is just when a piece of unauthorized code is able to execute in a section of memory on the program, which otherwise would be inaccessible to the program. So who wrote the Morris worm? It was written by Robert Morris. It's important to note that he never intended for the worm to cause any damage to the computer systems that it infected, but rather he wanted to inform the public on the vulnerabilities that existed on the computers of the time. And following the release of the worm, Robert Morris was charged, was actually the first one to be charged under the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, which he would later be sentenced to 3 years on probation and 400 hours of community service. So although Robert Morris did not intend for the worm to cause any real damage, the issue that led to those unintended consequences of the worm was because of a bug in the source code of the worm, which allowed for computers to be infected multiple times, even if they were already initially infected. And this essentially depleted those computers of their computing resources, which inadvertently caused a denial of service attack on those machines and thus rendered them inoperable. So, what was the lasting impact of the Morris worm? Well, it led to the first formations of the computer emergency response teams, which was actually mandated by the DoD. But uh, it also inspired the creation of antivirus software in the hopes that they would that these programs would block future forms of malware from gaining access to computer networks. And the Morris worm also inspired future generations of malware authors to create various other forms of malware, such as ransomware and spyware and whatnot, as well as computer security professionals who began to view cybersecurity as a much more necessary practice. And lastly, the Morris worm highlighted the importance of cybersecurity in the digital age that was to come. This concludes my presentation. Thank you.